Hello, as promised, excuse me. I wanted to come online and just talk to you about pelvic floor health. So, I'm passionate about allowing women to feel empowered by lifting weights and working with a wide variety of women from different ages, different backgrounds. Some of us having children, some of having natural births, some having cesarean sections, some not having any children. But many times when I do an initial consultation and we talk about maybe we talk about how many children they might have, or we talk about past experiences. And one of the first things that may come up, that is very common to come up with women, is maybe a prolapse, maybe some dysfunction with pelvic floor. Or some people do have issues with their pelvic floor, whether it's they're nervous to get on a trampoline and bounce, maybe they're nervous to laugh in case they might I'm going to wet myself if I laugh. We all know of experiences of friends that may be suffering with pelvic floor weakness, or maybe it's affecting you. I think more and more we are getting more confident in talking about the things that affect us. So whether that is lower back pain, whether that is pelvic floor dysfunction, weakness, we're able to talk about that a little bit more and actually delve into as to why and what we can do to move forwards. The biggest thing for me is that my clients talk to me about any weaknesses that they feel that they may have, or issues that we need to work on. I think sometimes we can you know skim over things that we find difficult. We avoid things that we find difficult, or that we avoid actually saying the word weakness as if that is something that is bad. I think anybody, if you've got any single person and put them, scan their body, analyzed, you're going to find muscle imbalances with everybody. They're normal, and it's not something that you should feel embarrassed about, having a muscle weakness or an imbalance. And that is exactly the same whether that is the pelvic floor muscles, or whether that is with your bicep or your tricep. So I think we need to talk about pelvic floor and about how it affects us. So I wanted to talk to you mainly because, as you know, I am very, very passionate about talking to women about lifting weights and resistance training as we age. As we age, we naturally lose bone density, we naturally lose muscle mass. So these are known as osteoporosis. You may well have be familiar with that. What can naturally happen then is that we're more prone to break a hip, or break a bone as we get older. It's almost like a breakdown. If you think of like muscle breakdown as a wall, if you can imagine a wall, and then somebody is literally throwing stones at that wall. Okay, now the natural effect is that we naturally will lose muscle mass as we age. But if you resistance train, you're going to be slowly building that wall up, and if you resistance train regularly, you're going to be able to help to offset some of that muscle loss that will naturally happen. And this is a natural process. So protein synthesis is something that will happen as we age. And it is true that it can also, it may affect what looks visible to you. So maybe my leg strength, maybe you've seen one of the regular pictures of somebody that has had I think they're a cyclist or something, and you can see that one leg is very no muscle at all on somebody that's sedentary, and then another person who is in their 70s has exercised their whole life and has significant muscle tissue. So we know that if we exercise, that we're going to help to build muscle, but as we age, we're really going to help to offset muscle loss, which is a natural process. And we can naturally find as we get older that maybe, as we get older, we lose strength, and we lose tone in our muscle, and that's including our pelvic floor. This has got a lot to do with the drop in estrogen that happens as we start to approach the menopause. So, it can be quite a scary time for a lot of people. So, as you start to get older, that estrogen levels drop. We start to maybe not feel as strong as we perhaps did. And maybe, a lot of clients that I work with over the age of about 30, you may then start to find that actually you have more aches and pains, maybe more, your joints are that little bit more susceptible to higher impact movements, and it becomes a no. Or you may find that a lower back pain becomes something that you're initially dealing with. And lower back pain can actually come from a weakness through the pelvic floor. It doesn't always have to come from having, you know, a pull or a strain in the lower back. So we want to think about the core. If we think about, you know, as I talked about, children, having children can be one of the symptoms as to why we have dysfunction through the pelvic floor. As we age, sarcopenia, this is going to be another reason as we might find some dysfunction as we age. But also it could be, you know, trauma through childbirth. It could be we hold stress in our pelvic floor. So again, maybe you're somebody like have a little feel on a date on a normal basis in your, you know, like your resting B face. Maybe you're somebody that is like that you find that naturally maybe that you bring tension into your jaw, you're quite stern, and I think I'm definitely capable of having like a resting, quite, you know, maybe trying to, you know, I have to talk myself to relax my shoulders, relax my jaw. And I think often we can be, a lot of people will bring tension to and stress into their pelvic floor. So you might be thinking about the pelvic floor and thinking, actually, is that, you know, maybe I have some weakness into the pelvic floor, and that's happened from as I've got older, that's happened through stress, that's happened through me approaching the menopause, that having, you know, 4 children. So what can, you know, the exercise that is online for many people is don't lift anything heavy. And I'm really not for this, because if you are picking up your child, okay, if you're picking up your toddler and then you're going to the gym and lifting pink dumbbells, then, you know, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense with having strength in your functional day-to-day movements. So being able to push, pull with strength, so that when we do come into like maybe, you know, picking up our washing, you know, it could be, if there's tightness there already, it could be actually, you know, it's normal for somebody to come to me and say, actually, I, you know, pulled my back, and actually I did it doing a really random thing. I was just picking up some washing off the floor, because that will have been something that's been building up for a long period of time. So I want you to think about, we want to build strength through the pelvic floor. We want to build strength through our body overall. So making sure that we're working our lower body weight, making sure that we're bringing in push and pull movements so that we create muscular balance. But often we can find that most of the movements that we do are in a sagittal plane. So that is that we are moving directly forwards. And what can happen with, you know, maybe, you know, depending on your day-to-day movements, but many people find that they have an imbalance posteriorly. So the glutes are almost like a friend, a working friend for the pelvic floor. So often if we've got some weakness there, that can affect the pelvic floor. But the pelvic floor literally sits and supports the pelvis, supports the abdominals. So, you know, all this, the contents that sit within our pelvis, that sit within our abdomen, it supports like a hammock. And these muscles can be different. It can be different. You may have some dysfunction where these muscles are tight. So these muscles will feel, maybe you feel that you need to go to the toilet regularly, and when you do go to the toilet, you may have that sensation of needing to go to the toilet again. Maybe you're constipated, or maybe on the other end of the spectrum, you may have more of a weakness. So tightness, not always. So I'm going to say that this is one of the key features, that if you have some tightness or tension or stress into the pelvic floor, it can relay these symptoms. Another symptom is that if you may find that you have some urinary incontinence, some incontinence in general. So I think, you know, and it doesn't have to be, the pelvic floor can affect both the front and back passage. So, you know, we need to think holistically about how we strengthen this area. Now, this muscle, again, as I said, can become weaker. So if you're feeling maybe that you're struggling with being incontinent or any kind of jumping movements, that you're more likely to find that you need to wear a tenor. You know, as I've got older, I definitely have found I've had a few targeted like leaflets come through the door for like £1 off a tenner, and I'm like, hell no. Like, but I think there is a lot of information out there where it says don't lift, don't resistance train. So we get frightened to what do we do in order to correct it. So one of the things that we know to do, is that we get given to do from a midwife, is to do some pelvic floor Kegels. Now, if you've got stress in the pelvic floor, that can actually aggravate things and make things worse. And essentially, if you've got a muscle that's particularly weak and then you suddenly start to go all in, then again, that can make things worse. So it's making sure that when you are bringing in Kegels, that you're thinking about your breath. And this is where Pilates for me really comes in. So bringing in Pilates and strength training is imperative to me, in for me to be able to um, restore the floor, to keep a nice, healthy, reboundable, like a trampoline pelvic floor that's going to help to support my pelvis and my abdominal um, abdomen, but also so that it's supporting and it's nice and relaxed and nice and happy, rather than thinking actually I need to suddenly go all in on the Kegels, or do what many people do is when they know that they have weakness or they know they have something that makes them feel slightly uncomfortable, is that we do nothing. It's like the bills that we might have that we need to pay, that we put into the drawer and deal on another day. And maybe all that's going to happen as we get older is that, and actually that's going to become something that we may have to deal with. Either we choose to work on it today, or that inevitably that's going to be another day, but at some point we're going to need to work on it. So I would say to try and think about go and speak to a professional. If you are, that you could go to see a physiotherapist. Go and have, if you've got any kind of back pain. Sometimes back pain doesn't always, as I said, have to be from your lower back. It can actually come from a weak pelvic floor. So we need to think about ways to strengthen the pelvic floor. So often, we eliminate movements that we think are going to make it worse. You can do Kegels. If you're going to do Kegels, ensure that you really focus on your breath. So if you think of the pelvic floor, and that sits underneath, literally like the foundation, and we really need to think of this as like the main function of the building. Okay, so if this is weak, it's going to affect the whole core, so that we're not going to be able to hold as much intra-abdominal pressure throughout the core. So if you think of your transverse abdominis, your rectus abdominis that sits at the front, your internal external obliques, they all sit around to create almost like a vacuum. And once you can keep tension into this from the diaphragm all the way to the pelvic floor, if we can keep that aligned, it almost acts like a cylinder of tight pressure that is going to really help to support the lower back. It's going to help me to do hinges, if Romanian deadlifts, squats, and really help me to feel that I'm supported through the core by having and working the core. So my breath, really thinking about that contraction, but also the release as I lift weights, as I perform Pilates, can really help the pelvic floor. Because if you have, say, a tight pelvic floor, and you're not fully actually thinking about that release of the pelvic floor. So the release tends to come as we breathe in. So it's thinking about that big deep breath in. Your ribs will naturally flare, and you will find then that your pelvic floor will naturally distend. So if you find that you have more tightness through the pelvic floor, you really want to focus on really just relaxing the pelvic floor. If you need to think that actually maybe, and you can have a combination of the two, by the way, so you can work both. So sometimes you can have tension through the pelvic floor, but you can have a weak. So if anything that's tight and not addressed can then become weak. So we then want to think about the lift. And it's almost thinking about, I use an analogy of like a drawstring purse. So you're coming from left to right, back to front, lifting up. And this is going to really make a massive difference, just focusing on your breath work. And then when you start to think about your breath work and start to actually put your pelvic floor under light, and not going suddenly, right, I'm going to the gym, I'm going to start to go and lift heavy dumbbells, but to start to bring some light resistance work, so that we're thinking about movements that are functional, that we do day to day, such as the squat, such as the hinge, such as push and pull movements that we do, getting our children in and out of the car. If we can do that, controlling our breath, being able to control our breath, engage the pelvic floor, this is going to help to protect our lower back, our pelvic floor, and help us to have more functionality as we get older. as we start, and it will help. And these muscles, they're muscles. So your pelvic floor will, just because you have some dysfunction now doesn't mean that, if you've had a prolapse in the past, doesn't mean that you can't strengthen those muscles and move away from dysfunction. But it is important that you address it, and it is important that you don't feel frightened in order to perform functional movements, because if you're getting in and out of a chair, then you're lifting your body weight up and down. That takes significant leg strength, that takes significant pelvic floor engagement. So I really want you to think about how you can move your body functionally, bringing in resistance training so that we help to offset sarcopenia, help to offset osteoporosis. It's going to make your on the studies on this or you only need to put the effects of strength training on our mental health or exercise on your mental health, and hundreds of studies will come up about the and I will put some links to some of the studies that I'm happy to share with you. But I really do think that we need to think about not being frightened of lifting weights, and that you don't need to just pick up pink dumbbells if you've had an issue with maybe you've had a prolapse in the past. But that doesn't mean to say just because you've had some pelvic floor dysfunction after having your children that needs to shape the rest of your life. Start to maybe bring in some Pilates mat based work. Think about being able to use your breath effectively to help really strengthen and engage your pelvic floor. Think about bringing in some mobility movements, certainly to try and mobilize through the lower back, to bring in some strengthening works to help to strengthen the glutes, to bring in some core stability work to help create strength and function through our core, so that we do have joints that are mobile, so that we have mobility and range of movements through our joints, but also stability, so that when we are dealing with any impact or just getting older, that we have stability through our joints to help prevent injury. And this is also, in relation to our skeletal system, but also into the musculature, so into the muscles that help to support our body and let us to have as much function as we can. I hope this has helped. I hope that you can think about talking about pelvic floor health, talking about maybe it affects you. Maybe I think more and more people need to talk about pelvic floor health, need to talk about the fact that actually it's affected. I did a questionnaire yesterday on my Instagram, and 90% of the women that replied to me said at one point they have felt nervous about their pelvic floor, whether that is the confidence of their pelvic floor, whether that is having had children. That we do need to talk about it. Talk about some of the things that affect the pelvic floor, like tension, stress, or talk about weakness, and how that it isn't just old-fashioned advice of not to lift, not to bring in resistance training, or to not or to just perform Kegels in order to restore the floor. Sometimes if you do hold stress into the pelvic floor, just doing repeated contraction through the pelvic floor can actually aggravate things. So, and if you struggle, please go and see a professional, because they can really help to turn your life around, and you don't need to be reliant on tenors. I hope this is helpful. Thank you for your time. Much love from me. Still waiting on my my streaming hub. Work starts again tomorrow. Adios. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Let me know if you found this helpful.